So if you wouldn't mind, you are presenting to us today both as a Forest Service recruiter, but you're a person that has a job in Fuels and Fire. And so if you just want to give a little bit of a background of where you came from in this field and what your job is, for the two of you would be really interesting, I think, to start with.
Absolutely. So I have worked in the fire realm, but currently just for HR. But you definitely got the right people for those questions about USA Jobs and the whole process and moving up. And yes, we hear those all the time. And everyone who watches this is going to be way better off than all the people who didn't. So definitely stick with us there. But my name's Chris Stockdale. I'm actually the lead recruiter for the USDA Forest Service. I've been in this position for almost 3 years. I have an unusual background probably to getting into this position, and I'll let Jeff introduce himself in a second and talk about his background as well. But I joined the military right out of high school and served overseas for a few years. Came back and went into the education world. Became a high school English teacher. I taught out in California for about 5 years, and then went into teaching college and at the university level while I was pursuing my master's and then doctorate. And I worked as a department chair and associate dean for the University of Central Missouri. At some point along the way, that's where I met Jeff, actually, and so he'll talk about that, I'm sure. But so I was doing that job, and for some of the benefits, which I appreciate the questions you sent, Heather. These are really good ones, and I'm happy to talk about these in a little bit. But because of the benefits, even though working in higher ed has some nice benefits too, and being a state employee, but no state benefits that I'm aware of beat federal benefits. And so, as I started to get older, then that's I was like, well, what's my retirement going to look like, and that sort of thing. So that's where I really made that jump, and I'm super happy that I did, both for the work that I get to do. Jeff and I have probably two of the best jobs in the agency, just getting to talk about what we do and working with a lot of young people, not always young people, but working with young people and college students, which again, I did throughout a lot of my career too. So it's a nice transition, and I still feel like I'm an educator. I'm going to educate y'all tonight and on all the different things that you need to know about the HR process and that sort of thing. But my entry into fire, so I served on a temporary promotion earlier this year as the branch chief for the National Fire and Aviation Staffing Team. So I headed up the 75-person team that hires every single firefighter in the agency. I think we perform 45,000 HR transactions on over 8,000 employees on that team. So it's a huge operation, and I got to learn a lot about from the boots on the ground, what things are happening out there and what things really matter to our frontline employees, and all the things that could probably be improved about the HR process, some of which are probably well beyond our scope, but at least we can hear from people, we can respond to folks, find out what's going on, and then raise those flags to OPM, which is sort of the governing body for the entire federal government. And because of some of that work, that's where we're getting the new firefighter wildland firefighter job series, which is really exciting. So our firefighters will be true firefighters, not forestry technicians who are doing firefighting work. And with that, salary increases and those sorts of things too. It's really emerging things that are happening. It's not all in place yet, but it will be very soon. So, and I'm not an expert on all those parts of it, but I can hopefully talk to some of it. So that's kind of my story and how I got here, and I'll let Jeff tell his.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. I could almost say ditto to Chris's story. Right out of high school, I joined the military, and I served active duty in United States Air Force for 11 years, which brought me to where I am now in Central Missouri at Whiteman Air Force Base, which is near the town that I met Chris in at the University of Central Missouri. Right out of the Air Force, I did so many jobs. I feel like when we get into how to put the best foot forward, I think one of those things is capturing all of your skills from everything that you've learned in life and making sure that that's written in a very legible, clear way so that it shows those skills that you have, because that's what we find out every day from talking to so many students and potential hires is underselling yourself for the skills that you really do have. So anyway, all of those things that I've done right after the Air Force in sales, and then higher ed, and then back to the Air Force with civil, federal service again, and now coming over to the U.S. Forest Service as a recruiter, has all added up to who I am today. And just like Chris said, I love what I do because I get to share all of that knowledge and skill, and hopefully help set someone else up for success in their career. One thing, we had a seminar yesterday with some students, and what we were telling them is, you got to think of two things, your goals and your beliefs, and the path that's going to get you there. And when you start down any path, where you begin is not where you end, right? Unless you're doing an out and back. But we're always heading somewhere. So let's keep that in mind, that when you think about the rejections and some of the failures, they're just temporary setbacks. Don't get discouraged. Keep your focus and keep your goals in front of you, and you'll get there eventually. So that's a little bit about me, and I know we have some questions that you want us to actually address. So I'll let you talk now.
Indeed. So the way that we'll run this is I'll just ask the next question. We'll go until you feel like you've covered that question. And for the folks that are listening here, I'll just throw the question in the chat as well. Sometimes it's nice to be able to see something in writing. So, let me get my chat back up here. Okay. So first question is, what are the benefits of short and long-term employment with the Forest Service?
Absolutely. Well, there are benefits to both. So let me talk about the short-term employment, right? So if someone's just looking for temporary positions, summer work, we have students who are in school who are out on fire assignments during the summer, able to have some flexibility to get back into classes, for the fall and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of flexibility there, but probably the biggest thing you're getting by entering into the temporary workforce is a foot in the door. So we all know, and all these questions that are on my screen, I know we'll get to kind of point to, it can be difficult to enter into the federal service, right? And you just heard from two different recruiters with two different backgrounds from two different places, but we both served in the military, and that helped us in some ways to gain federal employment. There are persons with disabilities that can be non-competitively appointed or get to apply to certain opportunities. So while we hire from all segments of society, there are certain segments that, because of federal regulations, have a special hiring authority, military spouses, let's say, or whatever else. So those things help. So we encourage people to pursue temporary opportunities, especially while they're maybe younger and their lives could be more flexible than maybe Jeff's life or my life, where we may, own a home or have roots, all his beautiful grandkids are right out the back door and that sort of thing. And so he's not able to, as much as Jeff would be the first one who packs that bag and heads up to Alaska for the summer, literally he would be the first person to do that. Then he wishes he did that at an earlier stage in life. So we encourage that, gets you a foot in the door. If you do it enough, then you could qualify for a special hiring authority, which is LMWFA, the Land Management Workforce Flexibility Act. And so we can provide some resources on that, but we do have some folks who do several seasons, and then they're able to use that specific hiring authority to basically get their leg up. But even without that, gets your foot in the door. They see the Forest Service on your resume when you're applying to permanent positions later. It's a narrative that makes sense. I'm not saying you can't work at McDonald's and still get hired here. Two of the last people I hired on this team, their last permanent jobs were working for McDonald's and working for Walmart. Great people, right? They've already got promoted and moved up. So not saying that doesn't work, but I am saying it begins to create a narrative, right? Your resume tells your story. on paper, because we don't, we're not going to call Nicole the minute that she applies and say, all right, tell us everything we need to know about you. We're just going to see that resume. And so that needs to make sense for what we're doing. Let's say Nicole's applying for a job in California, and I see a bunch of stuff that's all East Coast all over her resume. Then as a hiring manager, I'm like, is this person really willing to move across the country for this? Are they going to be able to survive without their support network? Because I see they're so embedded, they're so rooted in this place, right? So it's all of those things that kind of paint that picture. And again, entering into a temporary position, it's going to be less competitive than the permanent ones are. So that's good. They're almost always open to the public. That's good. That means anyone who's a U.S. citizen or national can apply. So those are all good things for you, because some permanent stuff is only open to merit candidates. We'll talk about that. So that's going to be good. And then it starts to build that resume. You're going to have some references. You're going to have some performance appraisals that someone can look at and say, okay, Nathan came and did this job. How well did he do it? He says he did it well, but let me see that performance appraisal, right? You get some letters of recommendation and those sort of things too. So to me, those are lots of benefits. Long-term employment, that's the reason that Jeff and I left our previous jobs and entire careers to come here. I was a professional educator for 15 years, and I left that specifically for the benefits. Yes, I'm a big outdoors person. I love fishing and hiking and hunting and all those things. So the Forest Service was kind of cool, but it wasn't like when I was 15, I was like, I'm going to someday become a recruiter for the Forest Service. It's just not how it happened. I was in a job, and the job was fine. But, as I got closer to 40 and have now surpassed that, then I was looking at, what does the next however many years look like for me? And so when I sat down and started doing that math and really looking at the dual retirement, most jobs you're either going to get a pension or a 401k style investment plan. And pensions are really few and far between. In the governmental area, they're a little more. So, right, state and even local sometimes, government, you can get that. But with federal service, you have both. So, and you can access a pension with as little as 5 years of full-time service, which is pretty wild and amazing. That after 5 years only, then for the rest of your life, you can get a check for every month. Now, after only 5 years, your check's not going to be very big, but after 10 years, it's even better. And after 12 years, it's even better. I mean, we have a retirement calculator in our HR account, and it's got 7 different scenarios preloaded for you that just says, okay, Heather, if you retired on this date, this date, this date, this date, or this date, or however many equals 7, here's what you would get every month. And then you can go in and play with it even more. Okay, what would happen if I did this, And I know some of y'all are really young and you're probably not thinking about retirement yet, but eventually you're going to be that 39-year-old me or 38-year-old me saying, oh crap, maybe I should have done something else. So you guys can not have to have that whole life-changing moment. You can just get on that path right away. And so the TSP is one of the top in excuse me, investment funds. It now has even more options than before. They've added some mutual fund options, so you can control a little bit more of your investments, which is really great. There's matching up to 5% of your salary, which is really awesome. That's pre-tax, which is really cool. And then again, your pension is going to be based on your high 3 years of salary, which for everyone is not necessarily their last 3 years, right? Like Jeff talked about that path, right? That where you're going up and up and up. But let's follow that analogy of the hike, right? So you go up and up and you hit that 3 years of high salary, but then you say, you know what? And we were listening to, I think, Michael, right, from State Department there. And and so he talked about that, hey, it's a lot of responsibility when you get up that high. And so the cool thing is you can actually take steps down in the federal government, at times even preserving a portion of your salary, which is really cool, and have a little bit less responsibility maybe as you're getting closer to retirement, or you've got big things happening in your life, or you have kids and they're getting ready to graduate, or whatever it is, and you can maintain all those benefits, and your retirement still calculated off of the high years of your salary, not necessarily the last few years. And of course we have healthcare and all those sorts of things too, but for me it's those retirement type benefits. And those are the same for any federal agency. So I'm not telling you we're any better than BLM or whoever else you want to look at. Those benefits are 100% exactly the same because they're all guided by federal regulations. There are some cool things about working for the Forest Service, though, that I will say. And some of these may be true with other agencies. I don't know. I don't work for them.
Cool
But
shirts.
there, you get cool shirts. But there are some cool things. We have a wellness program, which is really nice, where you can work out on the clock. So for up to 3 hours a week, where you can engage in physical activity, and again log that as hours on the clock, which is really cool. There's a lot of flexible scheduling, and it's always dependent on the mission. It's dependent on the local units, dependent on your exact job, right? We hire people who work at a front desk. Well, they don't have flexible schedules because the office opens at 7:30 and closes at 4, and they got to sit there the whole time except for lunch, right? So, but it depends. But in many cases, I think you're going to find a lot of flexibilities and the ability to flex hours and earn credit hours and overtime, and especially in the fire world, and that's pretty cool. For non-fire employees like Jeff and myself, we can still go out on fires. So we can go through a training program, get our red card, and start to learn like radio operator or one of the many support positions that we have, and we can still go out and be part of that fire, that important mission for our agency, which is pretty cool for being, in the agency, but maybe not a full-time firefighter. And I'd say the other thing, because we're so large, so we have almost 40,000 full-time employees. We're big, right? Then there's so many opportunities to move up, to move laterally, to move to other locations, to even move out of one job series and start a whole new career doing something else. Some of our recruiters are former firefighters. They're former foresters. They did that for a while. They did the boots on the ground. They started to get a little gray in the hair, and they said, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll do something else for a little while. And it's such a great opportunity. That's great for our team because they can go out and say, well, let me tell you what my experience was like, right? So they can tell that exact story. There's a lot of support positions that people can go into later, education type positions, working for Job Corps, which is a really cool training program for students mostly from disadvantaged backgrounds who can learn some skill sets, including fire. We have firefighters who did a lot of cool boots on the ground stuff. Now they train up these kids, 18-year-old kids, 20-year-old kids or whatever. They take them out and do prescribed burns and that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. So again, just the size helps of the agency, and that we're everywhere, including Puerto Rico, including international programs where people can go overseas, talk to other countries about how they mitigate fire risks and what their prescribed burns are like and those sorts of things. Those are our employees who are going over there and doing those cool things. So a lot of benefits, in my opinion. Anything I'm leaving out, Jeff, that?
No, not at all. The only thing I would say on the temporary side, one thing that is really an advantage to the temp employee is they get to try out a job. They're not stuck there. They don't, you spend a lot of time, energy, and effort training and developing a certain career, and maybe you find out you really don't like accounting. Well, it's too late. You've already spent a lot of your life becoming an accountant. So now you feel stuck. The temporary side is a great opportunity, especially as Chris pointed out, with your youth, to try out things and see what you like and see if it's something that you could see yourself enjoying the rest of your career. And then even if you make it to the permanent side, just like he said, there's multiple opportunities for you to move within the agency as well. So yeah, think about the what's in it for you on the temp side is it's kind of like a interview for a job. Really, you're trying it out, see if you like it. That's the only thing I'd add.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Question number 2. Are there moves being taken to improve hiring in HR? I'm sure you're not unaware of the many challenges, but I am not a Forest Service employee. I do teach many people that struggle with the HR entering employment with any federal agency, but it does seem to be primarily Forest Service. So there's the initial entering into the agency that's challenging, and then there's also a lot of really frustrating hurdles that people encounter inside the HR system. Namely, now I recognize at this point in my adulthood, I recognize that there's problems that people experience, and then there's there's not that they're not real, but there's things that you're like, okay, has anyone asked, like, have you looked into why that is? And generally though, across the board, what I hear regularly is people that will apply to a job and HR doesn't know their field, and so they are not qualified for that job because the person that vetted them had no idea. So the class that they took, the credits that they applied for, the degree that they have, the experience that they've received is not valued. And the piece of this that I'm especially concerned about is that I see the marginalized populations being most affected by this process. And so I worry as an agency because again, I don't work for the Forest Service, but I feel like I kind of do. I just get a lot of opportunities from the Forest Service and a lot of support, and I really appreciate it. And so it feels kind of like my home team, you know? And so I want to, when I see these marginalized individuals that are being thinned from an agency that I know is trying to increase diversity and inclusivity, I'm thinking, dang, like something's got to give in that process. So curious what your thoughts are here.
Yeah, happy to tackle this one. This is a great one, right?
Can I start real quick, Chris? I want to say something from the old man's perspective.
Okay.
First of all, we got to look at how bad it was and appreciate how much improvement we've made. As the old guy, I was on the old website and the old application system, and just the web presence and the USA Jobs and the resume builder, some of those things we take for granted, but they were horrible, way worse than you can imagine today. So I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but federal employment has gotten easier because I tried 30 years ago. You know what I mean? I'm that old. So I just want to say something to that to sort of speak to the progress that has been made. Are we there yet? Oh no. And I'll let Chris go from here, but we certainly have made huge leaps and bounds. You guys are too young to realize it.
My time in federal service was with the AVU Digital Services platform. So I do have some fond memories of that system.
Yeah, appreciate that.
All right,
yeah.
With that said, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So a few things, being a federal agency, then we're under this umbrella of the Office of Personnel Management, which is kind of like HR for the federal government. So most things that we do are dictated by them. When I remember when Jeff first came to my team, then he's like, why do we need to, why are we doing this? Why? And I'm like, because we have to. That's the law. It would be illegal not to do that. Couple other things. So yes, the Forest Service probably stands out with having, I see the number of HR help cases that come in. So I know there are a lot of people frustrated with that system, probably more so than other agencies, possibly because we do more hiring than I think any agency out there. So the team that Jeff and I work under, so the National Talent Acquisition Branch, which is not the entire agency, that team alone hires 18,000 people a year. Massive undertaking with about 150 HR people. So divvy that up, right? And I don't hire anyone. I'm a recruiter, so we don't even count, right? But divvy that up and imagine what your, 200 and however many work days there are in a year. Imagine what that would look like if you're on a team that hires 18,000 people a year, because we hire 14,000 temps. And so every year we hire them, onboard them, they work, sign their timesheets, do all those things, and then we offboard them, and then we wait a few months, and then they come back to us, and we're like, oh yeah, hey Nicole, I remember you. Like, we'll rehire you, and then we do that exact same process again. So it's such a large mechanism that it should not be surprising that things get lost in the shuffle, and that we have challenges, that applicants face challenges, people trying to connect, like Heather, applicants with opportunities are seeing challenges, like totally valid. I'm sure most of those are valid. So let's start there.
Mhm.
Are there things being done to fix it? Yes. I mean, daily. I'm in meetings daily about, you know, utilizing special hiring authorities in different ways. We're getting to roll out as an agency direct in person on the spot hiring for firefighters for the first time, or at least the first time in the more recent history of the agency. We've got 3 events. Jeff's going to be running a 2 of them in Region 8 and Region 9. But so yes, there's lots of things happening. Baby steps. I hope every day it's a little bit better, like Jeff said, than it was however many years ago. And DEIA is definitely a major focus of the agency and really the federal administration right now under this leadership. And so that's going to be a part of everything that we do. I've been in meetings for the last 2 weeks helping write the new DEIA plan for the agency. And one of those, I think, goal 2 is about recruitment, right? So how do we remove some of these hurdles that individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds, people, minorities, women, what have you? What are the obstacles that any of those identified groups are facing, and then what can we do to mitigate those for them? So yes, on improving the process. I will also say that because of the amount of hiring the agency is doing right now, so part of the infrastructure bill, then we're staffing up 6,000 additional permanent positions. Knowing that, and we'll talk about this too, 70 to 80% of all hires are internal employees, which is why I just said it's great to get your foot in the door as a temp, right? Because 70, 80% of those jobs are going in-house. So the chief wants to hire 6,000 additional full-time employees. To hire 6,000, our team, mine and Jeff's team, we're going to have to hire 32,000 people to get there, because 70 to 80% of them are going to be internal. So then they move up, and then we hire people behind them who are also internal, and then they move up, and then we hire people behind them who are also internal. And you see how long it's going to take to get to that 6,000. So while I will say that I believe we're going to see some market improvements over the next couple of even months, but over years for sure, I will also say the next probably 24 months, we're going to see some lags in time and in processes because we're doing such a high volume of hiring. And so, okay, so keep in mind with the 6,000, and that'll take us 32,000. We're not counting all the retirees who are waiting on the economy to recover a little bit and who are all going to drop that packet at the same time. So now that 6,000 becomes 7,500 or 8,500 or whatever, and now we got to hire 50,000 people to get to that point. So yes, I think you're gonna see some improvements. I also think you're gonna see some lag time based on the amount of hiring that's going on. What all that means for applicants is nothing but good news. That means you're gonna have lots and lots of opportunities to apply for positions because we're gonna have people retire. We're gonna have to fill the 6,000, and we just have increasing needs, in our day-to-day lives anyway. So that's good if you know how to navigate it. So that gets to Heather's other part, right? About that we're seeing some people, yep, exactly. We're seeing some people not make it through that system. So I will tell you that it is an unusual system. However, once you learn the rules, right? Let's kind of apply game theory, right? Game theory, there's a system, there's certain rules to that system. And if you know those rules, you can sort of advance in levels, right? If you apply certain things, you'll get a certain result. USA Jobs is nothing but the same thing. We're running a big hiring event actually right now, and I screenshot an applicant's resume and sent it to my full team of recruiters. And the reason I did it is because the resume was 2 lines long. 2 lines long. And I sent it to my team and I said, pop quiz, tell me how this person made it through the HR process. We would call it eligibility and qualifications, right? How did they make it through qualifications with a 2-line resume? It's because they know the rules of the game. They know how the system works, and those rules are not difficult. So for that particular job, that individual was qualifying on education, not experience. So all they had to list was their name and that they had a bachelor's degree, and we immediately qualified them. We did not need anything else. So if a job you're applying to has specialized experience, meaning that you have to have particular things, then it doesn't matter, to Heather's point, that HR person, or doesn't matter. because all they need to do is see those 3 lines of specialized experience in your resume. Those could be the only 3 lines. Not great for getting hired, right? Because that's just getting through the HR hurdle. So you can make it through the HR hurdle with 3 lines, right? You'll see specialized experience, and I can pull up example a little bit, but it'll say something like, collaborated with community members. And so your 1 line on your resume can say, while engaged on this prescribed burn, we collaborated with the local sheriff's department, a local whatever, and a local whatever, right? Done. You do that 3 times, you're getting through HR every single time. There's no other trick. We could end the presentation today, and every single person who follows that will get through every time that they are indeed qualified for a job. Now, you can't just make up stuff, right? So you can't say, I have briefed the president of the United States regularly. You can't just say stuff, because we would try to find, evidence of that in your resume. And, again, your resume tells a story. So you're like, why would this person be briefing the president? You get the idea. But if you do that, you will get through the HR process every single time. If you don't, with the Forest Service, you just create an HR help ticket. And so every USA Jobs announcement for the Forest Service has a link to do that. And you're basically say, I'm requesting a 2nd level review of my application because I know I qualify for this job. So there's a chance that someone made a mistake. That happens, right? Many of us in life, especially with administrative type tasks, we've made mistakes. We've made typos in emails, and we've put a calendar invitation on the wrong date or whatever. So someone saying that Nicole's qualified versus unqualified could be a mistake. And so she can just do an HR help ticket, and it'll go to typically a supervisor or a lead on that team who will look at that 1 more time. And again, all they're looking for are those 3 bullets from the specialized experience. And they're saying, do they have these 3 things? Collaborated with community members. They either have that in their resume or they didn't. And if they have that, then they're going through that process. So that's the part that is the sort of behind the curtain piece. That's not super complicated, but if you don't know that, then you're not going to make it through. What that also means is you have to have a different resume for every single job you apply to. Every job, because it will have different specialized experience. And so many times, I talk to students weekly, and, I think I was in Baltimore at Society of American Foresters, and, he's like, well, I've been applying all this stuff and not here. And I'm sure I'm doing it wrong. And I'm like, I'm sure you're doing it wrong too, because you would get through if you're doing it right. It's very simple once you know that rule, right? So the first step, so let's talk about the HR process. The first step is eligibility. Are you eligible to apply to that job? I had one of my recruits the other day send me some, GS-12 program specialist thing. Like, hey, what do you think about this? I said, great. On paper, you qualify. However, you're not eligible to apply. You're not a current competitive service employee, meaning already a member of the federal government. You're not, as far as I know, a person with a disability, meaning you have a Schedule A letter. You're not a qualifying veteran. You're not, I went through all the things. You're not those things. So even though on paper you're qualified for that, you are not eligible to apply by federal regulations. So that's it. But I'm like, let's look at some other things that you are eligible for. So that's the first HR hurdle, right? First thing, you got to find the job and apply to it. We'll talk about that too. Secondly, they're going to ask you what we call screen out questions. Are you a veteran? Are you a whatever? Are you a U.S. citizen? Because open to the public jobs are open to U.S. citizens or nationals. And so if you say no to all of those, then you will be deemed ineligible and you won't be able to be considered for that job. But as long as one of those eligibilities you qualify for, then you're going to be able to get in. So the second part is, okay, so am I eligible? In other words, am I a member of a certain segment of society, including U.S. citizens, if that's advertised, who's eligible for this position? And if so, then go from there. That's the first thing you look at. The second thing you look at is the specialized experience. So there could be, for fire positions, there could also be what we call general experience, right? 6 months of ranch work, some kind of manual labor, whatever else, for like a GS3 entry level thing or something like that. So you would need to address that. If your resume says that you worked for Johnson Farms LLC and you don't have anything else on there, right? Some people just like say where they worked and what years. Then I can't say that you have 6 months of ranch experience. It's implied, but because you didn't put it in there, then I can't qualify you, right? So that's where a lot of people go wrong, that they're not. So rather than looking at it as HR is not saying that I'm qualified, it's really, and I'm not saying this is the right way to do it. I'm just saying using game theory, this is the way the rules work. then it's the applicant not demonstrating that they are qualified. So I always use the example of someone could say they were a customer service rep for 20 years, and the specialized experience says answered telephones and directed customers to appropriate office. If their resume doesn't have the word telephone in it, I can't qualify them. I can't assume that because they were a customer service agent for 20 years that they answered the telephone. I don't know, right? It seems obvious, and Heather wants to laugh at me because it was like, well, of course, Chris, they would have answered telephones, but I'm just telling you that's the rules of the game. That's how it works, right? The good thing is with game theory that those rules are the same for everyone. So regardless of what segment of society is looking at those rules, if they know the rules and can navigate those rules, then they're going to have the same result as everyone else, right? To get through the HR process. What hiring managers do, I don't know, right? They are hiring based on whatever, right? Some people are really wanting some education thing, or they want to see certain fire experiences, or they're looking for people that have done temp work for a while and now are going into permanent. That's all subjective, and that's a whole different part. But the HR part, I don't want people to fail on that because it's simple rules. You just have to know the rules, follow them every single time. And yeah, that's the annoying part. I can apply to a job, takes me I can apply to most USA jobs about 3 minutes. Doesn't take long. But update my resume is the hardest part, because then I have to take my time, figure out where I have that specialized experience. In most instances, you have to have it for a year. And so then piecing that together, that's why you have to have the months along with the years of every single employment, because you could only have worked some summer jobs, but I'll take that and add all that up. That's why you have to have the hours per week, because it's all a calculation. So if you work for 15 hours a week for 3 months, then I put that into a calculator and say, okay, now we're like a fifth of the way there. Give me a few more summer jobs and I can get you to a full year of doing that. And then we're good, right? We're in clear sailing there. So those are the tips. The final thing I'll say, the Forest Service has tons of resources to help you with this. So we have a 4-part webinar series, tips for job seekers, navigating USA jobs, federal resume workshop, hiring eligibilities and qualifications, the most boring one, but the most important one, right?
Yeah.
Jeff reads the script sometimes, so he knows it's long. That's the most important one, because if you're not eligible or qualified, you'll never make it to the other part, right? We have those webinars, great resource. We also offer one-on-one consultations with our recruiters. So you can, after this today, whoever's watching in the virtual universe here, you can go and actually book with Jeff or any member of my team. And we have members of my team from all walks of society, and which really cool backgrounds. You can read their bios and find out like, hey, I kind of relate to this person. Let me book with them. And then you can just sit down and say, okay, let me tell you my story and what I'm looking for. And we will guide you that right where you need to go, talk about future job opportunities that are coming up, etc. And then that's the final thing. So again, I talked about eligibilities, qualifications, the 2 hurdles, right? But the first hurdle is finding the jobs. So I talked to someone before and a student, and they were having a hard time on their job search. And I said, have you tried USA Jobs? And they said, yeah, I didn't really see anything. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means, right? Our agency alone probably posts anywhere from 20 to 120 jobs a day, every single day. Well, every single work day throughout the year. Some of those jobs may only be open for 2 or 3 days. So you have to have a saved search going, or a habit where you check USA Jobs every day, or especially if you're a student, you join the Forest Service Job Seeker Database. And Jeff can get you some links here in a little bit, but join the Forest Service Job Seeker Database. We will send you an email every single week that's on Friday that says, here are some upcoming opportunities, especially for students and recent grads. So then you won't miss out on, and for fire jobs and for temp jobs. So those 3 main buckets we'll send often. Let's see, there's Nicole had a question here. Let me see this. Can I ask a question as a hiring manager, field crew leader, hiring seasonals who are looking to get into the Forest Service after working for us? Can you explain? I don't know if I'm fully grasping.
It's hard to type the question.
Yeah,
so
you're good.
This is my 2nd year being a field crew leader, and we're looking to hire 4 technicians next summer. And our current technician is actually moving up, but she was having trouble with US Forest Service jobs applying to things. And my question is, we have a wide variety of things we do, ranging from like turtle telemetry work to prescribed fire. But the term that she worked for is 6 months. Does she need to break down her experience to like she did 100 hours of turtle telemetry and like 300 hours of fire, or is it just
Nah.
whatever the term of the job is?
Yep, just
Is her-
put
okay.
from this month year to this month year, and
Okay.
how many hours per week. That's the most important thing. And then as long as those 3 or 4 bullets of specialized experience fall under that,
Yeah.
then again for 6 months at full time, then we're saying, okay, you're halfway there, right? If
Yeah.
it's 6 months at, let's say, 25 or 30 hours, then it's a little bit less than that, but it will all be calculated out, so that they can get to that 1 year at that next level, right? And some people see that, so let's talk about that too. So some people see it's like you must have 1 year equivalent to the federal service of GS4 to get to GS5, right?
Yeah.
The key word there is equivalent, because so many people think like, well, I wasn't a GS4, right? I was working for state. I was working for private. That's fine. It just has to be equivalent. So you're saying it's equivalent. We listen to you. It's self-reported, right? That assessment questionnaire is self-reported, self-scored. It's whatever you say you're qualified for. If you say you're expert in Microsoft Excel, put it down. I hope you are, but put it down, right? It's self-reported. So I'm not going to quiz you on it.
Awesome.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
No
Yeah.
problem.
So one thing that I have, I'm on the Association for Fire Ecology Education Committee, and we've developed certifications for the certifications that we've got are, let's see if I have them up here, wildland fire professional certification programs. So we've got wildland fire technician, wildland fire practitioner, wildland fuels technician, and then a similar manager pathway and ecologist pathway. And what we're trying to replicate is some kind of a professional standard for what it means to be those. And what my dream is that there's some rule to this game that says, oh, well, just because, you'll just need to make sure that you meet the criteria of the wildland fire technician, and then you're qualified for this job. And to me, that the money would be for that, the magic of that opportunity would be that HR wouldn't have to vet that process, that the process to become certified through the AFE would be absorbed through that professional certification process. And then more people would seek for professional advancement and certification.
Love it. So I got some feedback for it. Yeah. So qualifications are all determined by the Office of Personnel Management. So we have no say in that. They don't change very often. Having a brand new series being stood up for wildland firefighting, especially in this short amount of time. I mean, that was amazing just to see a new series be created, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those don't change very often. However, for most jobs that you're going to qualify on education, then those requirements are going to be fairly general, right? So for our fire specific jobs with educational requirements, so that's the 401 series, the Natural Resources Management series. And so that's going to require both 90 days of firefighting experience and a natural resources degree. But while ideal, it would be cool to see some certificates like, what you just talked about or whatever. If we're only talking quals, all they need is a natural resources degree. So a bachelor's in agricultural science counts just as equally as something else. If we're just talking quals, right? I'm not talking about the hiring manager, because then they're looking for something completely different. And if I'm the hiring manager hiring for a fire position as a 401, I'm looking for as much fire experience as I can get, both boots on the ground and educational, because there has to be that educational component. So I don't know exactly where to take that, other than like, I agree with you. That would be great that, you guys send it already kind of check the box for us and whatever. It's just not the way not just Forest Service. We can't change that, right? Because that's the other good thing about federal employment, right? So let's say you want to qualify as a 401 fuel specialist, let's say, right? So natural resources degree, cool, whatever that is, and 90 days of firefighting experience qualifies for you for that, right? The great thing is you can take that same package, the BLM qualifies you just the same. Anywhere else that is hiring that exact same NRCS, right? National Resource Conservation Service, also under USDA, Same exact qualifications because they're not determined by the individual agency. It's all determined by the Office of Personnel Management. So that's kind of the cool thing, that even though it's kind of general and whatever else, but that also means you can shop that around wherever else. Once you qualify as, I'm a 201, Jeff's a 301. He qualifies for a 301 for us and for every other agency. He can go to the IRS as a 301 now, and I can go to Social Security as a 201 because that's my job series, and I already meet the quals that are determined by, again, that parent governing body, the Office of Personnel Management.
So I'm skipping ahead one question. I'll go back
Okay.
to the number 5, but this, since we're on the line of education. So
Yep.
clearly I'm in education. You obviously coming from an education background,
Yep.
I'm sure you can relate to this question here, which is that I've got students in the College Natural Resources, and I represent University of Idaho, but I also represent all institutions that offer fire programs through the Association for Fire Ecology. And one of the tricks that comes through this is the students will come to college. Let's say they come to college because their mom and dad tell them that they have to come to college. And they pick fire because they're like, fire seems kind of cool. And then they start to take fire classes and they're like, I like this, but like, what is this actually going to get me? And my answer is, it's not. It's not going to get you, unlike other degrees like forestry or like, accounting or whatever. There's not like a job that's holding this degree over your head to get a degree in fire ecology management before you get that job. And I don't expect that to change as far as like getting a specific, this for that, as far as a degree that is, especially a specialized degree in fire ecology management. But what I see, especially with this new fire season, is actually a moving away from a recognition of the importance of education. And one of the things that I work with the National Wildfire Coordinating Group is I've just rewritten the Burn Boss curriculum for NWCG. And I'm not going to like make wide statements that says, if we just educated people more, then we'd solve all of our problems. I don't think that that's necessarily the case either. But I am concerned with this. It just continued for the last 20 years, this really mixture and an unclear position from agencies, usually in that OPM standard of whether we value education or not. And so the question here then being, how do you see education fitting into jobs related to fire and fuels? Is there anything other than frosting that education is providing to these people that are staying within fire and fuels?
Yes. So within the agency, with that education, you're going to have more opportunities for advancement. And I don't mean that in the general sense, because, that's a lot of times people, when we host our webinars, that's a question that comes up like for general jobs, right, in the agency is like, will education help me move up? I think some people on my team probably would answer that yes. I would answer that no, because the only thing that matters is the OPM qualifications. So for some of the jobs, you can go all the way up to the chief of the Forest Service and never need a degree. And I've worked with lots of people who are GS-15s that do not have any college education whatsoever. Is that good? I don't know. I'm probably not in a position to answer that. But I obviously personally value education. Jeff personally values education. He has a master's degree and multiple other degrees and worked as an educator. I worked as an educator. I have a doctorate. So I personally value those. And I know that Jeff called me out the other day because in our team chat, I was like, yeah. And I'm like, I have a doctorate and I'm not even using it. And he's like, BS. He's like, you're using your doctorate every day. You're using it in these ways and these interactions and whatever else. And he's right. I was trying to make another point, right? He's always right. So, so I think there are intangible things that college education will provide you, right? My bachelor's is in English. Okay. Some of us may think that that's useless, but I communicate every day and I'm called on by the GS-15s that I work for. Hey, Chris, can you look over this email before I send it to the chief? Right. Because I've got that particular skill set. So any education you get is of value. I always tell people to invest in themselves and invest in education, but other people can invest in other things, right? Businesses that they want to run if they're doing it the right way or whatever. That's great. But, always invest in yourself, and education's a great way to do that. The HR answer that I'm here to represent, it will give you more opportunities to move up, because if you come in right now as a forestry technician, which is where our firefighting is housed, if you come into that 462 job series, you're going to have a ceiling, and that ceiling is not going to be GS 15. It is not. It may be 9. It may be 7. It just depends on what you end up doing and where that leads you. But then you start looking over at this 401 that has an educational component. And all of those other 462s, those forestry technicians who didn't take the path that you guys took to go to school, they're not eligible. Well, they're eligible. They're not qualified to apply to those jobs, right? Because they don't have that degree. And so immediately you skip all of those other people, someone maybe with 20 years of all kinds of, crew leader experience and engine captain and whatever else, and you go past all those people because the 401 series requires a degree. And if you have that degree, you can move up. You can become a GS 15 in a 401. So that really the sky's the limit by going in there. I will say it doesn't mean you can't progress without that degree, because there's the 301 job series, which is what Jeff's in, that even though he has a master's degree, there's not a degree requirement. And so there are dispatch jobs that are 301s. It's, I think OPM calls that like general management or something. So anytime where you're kind of running a program, then you could be a 301. In fire worlds, they could still require that 90 days of firefighting experience. So Jeff couldn't apply to those because he doesn't have that, but someone coming up through the fire ranks could. So I think there's intangible value to it. I think our agency and other agencies need the educational foundations, the research skills, the ability to communicate information to a wide variety of audiences, things that education brings. And if that education's focused within fire and the kind of things that Heather's talking about, then if I'm a hiring manager, I snatch up those people all day. So that's that. So it can never hurt. And I fully believe it would help both the intangible parts of your career, being able to move up because you've got the soft skill set. And then if you want to go into that 401 series, you've got the hard skill set that goes with it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to share a little story, Heather, real quick. When I was 18, right out of high school, I was just working general labor for a construction company, and we were putting water lines through the county. And I happened to be looking over the foreman's shoulder. He had the blueprints out on the hood of his truck. And I was reading ahead on the blueprints where we were going to be putting fire hydrants and check valves and all this stuff. And he goes, "Wait, you can read blueprints?" And I said, "Yeah, my dad's a draftsman and I learned how to read blueprints at his knee from a baby." And he goes, "Guess what? You're now a crew foreman and you're going to take these blueprints and run this new line." Right. And I was 18 years old and I had people working for me. So it taught me right then and there that you have what you know matters. Right. And we call that education. So it's really important because at some point, even if you come in, in the minimum qualifications, what you know is going to springboard you into an opportunity that was just laying there dormant, waiting. So I totally agree with what Chris is saying. Although, like you were saying, there, get a degree in accounting, it leads to an accounting job. That's the whole point, right? In education, right? You're going to be an educator, but it doesn't necessarily translate immediately, but education is very important for that progress.
Mhm.
And I know I've had a question waiting to be asked there. I keep
Oh.
seeing the hand go up.
Tony, do you have something?
Yeah.
There we go. I should be unmuted. You guys might not have all the answers, and until we actually see the new job code for these new file and fire position, are the fuel stuff going to generally keep going with the 0401 code?
I have a meeting every single Monday about that exact topic.
Because it's going to be really interesting to
Yep.
see what happens specifically that and like what Heather's asking about.
I agree.
And
Right.
where that overlaps. So
Right now, it's still moving forward with the 401s. The larger question will be that pay differential.
Mhm.
So when the details of that increased wildland firefighter pay in that new series that does not have an educational requirement,
Mhm.
that comes out, then you tell me, would you, if a firefighting job that you qualify for pays 20 grand more a year than the 401 fuels that you have to have the education for,
Yeah.
are you willing to just stick with 401 and just eventually move up? Or are you going to say, you know what, I don't mind some boots on the ground for a couple more years?
Yeah. No, and that's something that I'm just trying to get an idea around.
Me too.
The other thought is these like perm seasonal positions and the fact that you might find yourself working for half the year and it turns into, of course, 3/4 of the year, or 3/4 of the year, but you're still doing 1,000 hours of OT.
Right.
And the fact that like those are not sustainable
Right.
for the individuals. So
I'm with you. I would say that the agency is definitely making a targeted movement away from temp for sure, right? Which is purely seasonal, and even from the perm seasonals to some more permanent year-round positions. So there is gradual movement there, but those are the kind of things too. At the time of job offer, you're gonna have to ask and be like, "Hey, this affects me and my family and my livelihood and my quality of life and everything else. Like, what are we looking at this year?" And go with what is the best fit there. But yeah, big question on the 401s. More to come. Call me back
Yeah.
in 4 or 5 months, and maybe I'll have more news.
And then just real quick, especially as you do your bulk centralized hiring, do you prefer navigating like the resume builder resumes or what people give you, or
Yeah.
what works faster? And I don't think we quite have the time to talk about it, but like that centralized hiring might be a good thing to kind of talk through for some of the folks.
Sure.
But
So
yeah.
yeah, both resumes are fine. I'd say I see probably 50-50. So I see 50% that are the resume builder and 50% that are not. The benefits of the resume builder, it's going to prompt you to put in the hours per week. It's going to prompt you to put in the month along with the year. Those little things that like a non-federal resume don't require, it's going to prompt that. So if you're newer at this, for anyone on the call, then I definitely recommend the resume builder because it will kind of guide you to where it needs to go. And because that format is very familiar. Every other resume I have ever seen in this agency is that format, right? I would say once you're familiar and you're 100% sure you're not going to leave anything out, feel free to move away from it. You can do, and I wouldn't, however, recommend those like fun, quirky, stylistic things. Those do not often translate from USA Jobs to USA Staffing, which is the back end of how we hire people. And I see those all the time. I meant to screenshot one I saw the other day and send it to the team, but they had some boxes and whatever, and it just did not translate. Also, make sure whatever you upload is a PDF, not a Word document, because every computer reads Word differently, and you worked on your spacing and your font so well or whatever. Well, if that government computer that opens it doesn't have that same font, your whole thing looks like garbage, right? So keep that in mind. That's why PDF is always preferred. Resume builder is totally fine, especially if you're starting out. Again, the main thing is it could be a 2-line resume. If you have the specialized experience, it doesn't matter. But again, we recommend, if you attend our resume workshop, you're going to hear us say there's no limit to the page numbers. My own resume is like 7 pages probably. I tell people if you worked at Taco Bell for 6 months, I want 12 bullets because you probably followed safety protocol. That's huge for our agency. You followed instructions from a supervisor. You did customer service. That's huge for our agency. You did financial transactions. You're like, well, it's just Taco Bell. Don't care. Financial transactions, right? People sell themselves so short on these experiences that they've had. So that's my rule of thumb. So that means if you worked somewhere even better than Taco Bell, I mean, what could be better? But if you work somewhere better than Taco Bell and for longer than 6 months, then maybe give me 15, maybe 20 bullets, maybe 25 bullets to really outline all of that. And then what you'll find when you see that specialized experience in that job is if you've got 15 bullets, you probably already got a couple of them in there, right? You just need to massage them a little bit instead of just, oh, okay, well, yeah, I only had 3 bullets, so now I got to add all of these, So This navigating the centralized fire events. I can talk about it briefly as well. Several ways to do it. Number one, set up a safe search in USA Jobs because you're going to get alerted to whatever. We typically hire for the same regions, the same type of positions at the same times a year. That's typically the case. Secondly, Jeff already put a link to Microsoft form to fill out to sign up for the job seeker database. I think that's one of the first ones he dropped in the chat. We will email you every Friday. So when we say, hey, Region 5 is hiring fire positions as part of their centralized event, you're going to get that email. You'll know you'll get that email 2 weeks before those positions open. So you have a little bit of window to be able to spruce up whatever you need and to apply to those. But again, there's a lot of ways to go about it. I'd personally, so I look at USA Jobs every day. I don't set up save searches, but I have my filters ready to go. And I just, most people have an internet habit every day of they open their phone, which you can use USA Jobs on their phone. They check their Instagram, they check their email, they check their text messages. Just add USA Jobs to that. You can create your own save search link. So if you go into USA Jobs and you add some filters and here's what I'm looking for, these locations or whatever else, then grab the URL at the top. That URL will take you to that exact same search result every single time. So if you bookmark that, all you have to do is just click that bookmark every day and you'll see the brand new jobs that were posted that day in that field and then roll from there. Those are some of my recommendations. I can give more later. And
Awesome.
and Heather will give you my email and y'all can email me anytime you want. I'll respond typically within a couple of hours, but at least within 24 hours.
I
Wonderful.
also recommend our website, the recruiting and hiring webpage. A lot of information on there.
Yep.
Right under, we do the webinars first, but right under that, it says hiring events. Any of those drop downs, there's one drop down for wildland firefighting. That's going to be updated on a constant basis. You'll get the same information in the job seeker database, but as events come up, those hiring events come up, they're going to be updated on our website. We're very, very sticklers about having relevant information on there. So I'd highly recommend just bookmarking that page and visiting it on a regular basis as well.
Yep. Agreed.
Cool. Okay, so I do have a couple, just 2 more questions. We're a little bit over, sorry for time. Feel free to hop off if you need to. This one should be a short one. This is something we just heard from Gus Smith. He's a district ranger. I can't remember where he works now. He moves around quite a lot, but he had mentioned something about exams. I've not heard of that before. Is that something that's coming up?
I saw this question and I should have done some research heading into this. We're actually running our Society of American Foresters event this week, so we have like 800 jobs to fill. But I will have to get back to you on that one, Heather. I've not heard anything. Obviously, there's a work capacity test for boots on the ground fire positions that you have to do, but I'm not aware of other exams, and so
Okay.
but I've got some experts who will tell me if I just missed a memo or something.
Yeah, it sounded like they were for upper level positions, more sciencey based types of positions. We didn't get a whole lot of information from him. He's
Yeah.
like, I don't know a lot about it. I just have heard from a couple people that have had to take some exams, and you might want to ask around on what that is.
And that is a part of USA Jobs. I've applied to USA Jobs positions before through other agencies, and then you get that automatic your application's received, and then I got another one within 24 hours that was like, if you want to be considered, you have to take this exam. So it's possible that some higher level positions, some other agencies are beginning to use that, maybe even our own, I don't know, but I'm unaware of anything for, more of the student level positions, entry level, fire, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I would only expect these at upper levels for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Yosemite paramedic position. That makes one sense for that particular role. Okay, last question. What are the overall recommendations for getting into a career? And we've covered some of this already. Getting into a career with Forest Service, and how can you stay balanced and happy there?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a good one. So the overall recommendation is be geographically mobile. If you are geographically mobile, you're going to have so many options. And it's okay if you're not. That's not a judgment or whatever. Everyone has life things happening. They have maybe parents that they're having to take care of or siblings or whatever else. It's not a bad thing. But that's step one. If you are geographically mobile, then you're going to have way more opportunities because, again, 70 to 80% of Forest Service hiring is internal. So if someone goes to a place that may be a less desirable duty location, they're just waiting for that internal opportunity to go to the more desirable one, right? If you put all your eggs in Fort Collins basket, you ain't gonna get a job. So sorry, you're not, because it's you and everybody, right? Although I would say it's pretty expensive to live there, but it checks lots of boxes for certain people. So that's kind of my thing is be willing to accept whatever, as long as you're able to take that salary at that level. You're only going to make that salary year one. Every January, we get annual increases. This year, we're anticipating a 4.7% across the board pay increase. If you're in a ladder position like a 5, 6, 7 or something like that, then those are going to be typically with positive performance, pretty automatic promotions. And so you're going to be able to move up the rank from there. And if you take an out of the way duty location, then good. You got your foot in the door. You accepted maybe a position that was less competitive than the Fort Collinses of the world. So the list of applicants was a lot smaller. Your name stood up a lot more because of that. And you only have to stay there however long you want, right? We always tell people, give me a year, right? Give me a year in Happy Camp, California, right? May not be the most ideal place on the world, but give me a year there, because then from there, your ability to move up is going to be so much better, right? Especially if you're coming in from the outside, because then you can apply to merit positions, not only demo or what we call open to the public, right? So by becoming that employee, you're going to be able to move up there. So that's the main thing. Apply to a lot. I applied to 88 federal jobs when I got this one. So when people say they applied to 2 or 3, I'm like, cool. For all you know, out of those 2 or 3, one of them is going to be canceled. They're not going to hire anybody. The hiring manager missed the deadline. They didn't even get anyone going, right? The other one, they already had the person picked out. That happens in life, right? So that they knew someone who would be great for that position, and surprised they ended up in the position, right? That's life. That can happen. And the other one, you were second place. They really liked you. They interviewed you, and you almost had it, but you were second place. Second place is great, but you didn't get the job. So that's why I tell people three ain't gonna cut it. 6 ain't gonna cut it. You really have to come up with that strategy and apply to a lot. I recommend just applying to 1 or 2 jobs a day every morning. That's what I'm a morning person. So I would, when I was working at the university, but wanting to make this federal move, then I would wake up every morning, have my coffee, and I would say, okay, let me find one. I found a job I wanted. I redesigned my resume, applied, second cup of coffee, did the same thing, applied, then I went to work. I did that every day until I hit 88, and these guys called me and I got the job. So I do recommend a lot. But again, if you apply to even 1 a day for 30 days, then you got 30 applications out there, and then there's less riding on every single one, right? Because it's the whole, like, I'm an English major, so like murder your darlings, right? You're gonna find that darling job that you're like, oh, this is made for me, right? You're not gonna get that one, right? The world is conspiring against you. You're not gonna get that job, okay? So what helps you get over that fact that you didn't get that job, and what helps you sleep at night and not stress about whatever, is applying to a bunch. And so if you've got 50 applications out there, I mean, they're gonna call you and be like, could you tell me what this job is? I don't even remember this one, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I remembered applying that however many months ago, right? So the more you have out there, the less pressure it feels, less pressure during interviews, especially because that can be a really nerve-wracking point, even though our interviews are pretty informal and just kind of like this, but still people can get nervous. And so, again, if you got one on Tuesday and another one on Thursday, you're less nervous. But if you put all your eggs in that basket for that darling job, and you're going to be the most stressed out person on the planet, and you probably won't get the job in the first place.
That's a really I really love that advice. I love the shift that's happening in my thinking about this process as you guys are describing it. And I think that's really what a lot of people are missing, is that they make a resume and they're like, but it's my resume. And I'm guilty of that as well. It's like, but I finished it. And to think about that as being a really dynamic document is, I think, just such a really important shift of mindset.
And
Pretty cool.
and I applied like Jeff to federal jobs at several other key parts of my life, and I did it wrong. I did it wrong. So I didn't get those jobs. I didn't get nothing. When I was first looking for a university job, I applied. When I was first got out of the military, I applied. But I probably wasn't addressing, I'm sure I was using the same resume every time. I wasn't addressing the specialized experience, and I did it wrong too. So you guys will be better than me because you're getting the advice earlier than I got, right? And then finally I figured out what I was doing wrong, and that helped. But again, the game theory, right? Like, I'll go back to, like, I grew up with Super Mario Brothers, right? I mean, you go and the first little Koopa Trooper like kills you, and you're like, oh crap. But you don't just like stop. You go and then the next thing kills you. You're like, oh crap, right? So that's the whole thing, is building up that resiliency of, I'm gonna keep at it because I still want the end goal. And these rules are the same. I'm gonna get better at it every time because they don't change. So, and if you don't, so with us, with the Forest Service, if you don't get that job and you think you should have or whatever, you can start a help case and just say, I just want to hear from someone on why I didn't get the job. And they'll say, you didn't meet eligibility. You were never eligible to apply. Or you didn't make it through quals. You didn't address the specialized experience in your resume. Sometimes it comes to me, and I'll call you up and I'll be like, look, here's the deal. I've told people that they didn't interview well because I could see their interview score. And I'm like, you made it through these hurdles, but you apparently hardly said anything in the interview. That happens a lot, right? Where we ask questions. Okay, we're going to take 30 minutes for this interview. We're going to ask you 5 questions. You need to do the math in your head. Okay, I've got like 5-minute answers here, right? So then we say, okay, tell me about a time you worked as a member of a team. And they're like, oh, well, I was on this student group and we did this assignment and blah, blah, blah. And then we did this and then it was done. And I'm like, okay, next question. And I have ended many interviews in 6 minutes because they had nothing to say. So again, you can get better and you can find out why. Just ask us.
I would say Chris brings up a good point. On our team, we, even once you become a federal employee, you're going to have to talk about yourself and your skills and what you brought to the table, because you're going to get your annual reviews, and the annual reviews are a conversation between you and your supervisor. And you can't just say, well, I showed up to work. You've got to you're constantly writing down what I've done, what I've accomplished, making sure that those accomplishments get into your resume. Another thing that I would add to what Chris has said is don't be afraid to reach out and make connections in those areas. Networking is a huge part of being successful in the hiring process. Showing your, the old school back in the day, used to walk into, we called knock on doors. Like he put in 88 applications when I was young and trying to get hired. I would knock on 88 doors with resumes, and most of them would end up with the, office manager ripping them up and throwing them in the trash. But it was constant and continuous contact. And so you can still do that in the virtual world. You can still make connections and build relationships and networks. A lot of that is that temp hiring opportunities that we talked about. But just like this, us now, you've met us. Chris said, you're gonna have access to our emails. We dropped in the links to the consultations. Talk to people who've been there, done that, and been successful. And to Heather, to your point, don't be me and be stubborn. I was like, no, my resume is the best. I'm a mule and I know what I'm doing. And I've got a degree in human resource management, and they can't tell me, well, guess what? They told me a lot and I never got hired. So I finally realized that I was the problem and said, let's do a little compliance here and look at this differently. So that was great realization that you came to on your own, because it took me a lot longer than you.
That's awesome. Any additional questions? I just got a Starburst from my daughter. Any other questions? Well, this has been awesome. I think one one more link, if you wouldn't mind sending, is you said that there was a 4-video series. I'm sure that that's public in places, but if you wouldn't mind just making sure I get to the right one and sending that link to me, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
And I will post those resources along with this recorded presentation to the website where we're keeping all these videos. And yeah, really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to us. And I'm sure that you've said these things a lot. And
I get paid to. It's great.
I get my say things. I'm like, I made a video. Go watch the video. Goodness sakes. But I appreciate you saying them to us personally. Obviously, it does soak in a little bit more when it's a conversation that you're having. And I hope that everyone that's going to be watching this recording, that you feel present in this conversation as well, because this is absolutely for all of you as well. So again, appreciate that, and look forward to working with y'all.
Sounds great. Best of luck to everybody's who's out there too, and reach out anytime.
Thank you.